Well, our blooper reel is off to a great start today. Hello again, everyone. It is Gordon Majak here, back with another episode of Timeless Pop, Rock, and Soul, and back with another one-hit wonder. One of those artists that just makes you ask the question, how could this band, this group, do such an incredible job, do this one song to perfection, and yet somehow mysteriously never follow it up? That's the question, right? With the one-hit wonders. And that's where we are going today. Back to 1977. And this is Ed Sanford. And over there on the other side with the long hair, that is John Townsend. The Sanford Townsend Band from 1977. The single, the big hit, the one-hit wonder. Pretty good tune, a song called Smoke from a Distant Fire. Now, the interesting thing about these guys, a lot of times the one-hit wonders are just artists that sort of come out of nowhere and then do something and then they disappear, but it's pretty obvious why, and there could be any number of reasons why they never really made it beyond that one song, right? Well, here's the weird thing about these guys. So check this out. Here's the single for the Sanford Townsend Band and their big hit, Smoke from a Distant Fire. Okay, now first of all, Smoke from a Distant Fire comes out there in June of 77, gets all the way up to number 9 on the US pop chart. Okay, so that's a legit top 10 hit, pretty cool, catchy tune, right? Well, check it out. Here they are. They're on a major label, man. They're on Warner Brothers Records here, one of the big labels. They've got the full backing of the label. And you see over here, this record is produced by Jerry Wexler and Barry Beckett, two heavy hitters in the music biz. I mean, Jerry Wexler, of course, responsible for so much of the great work done by Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin and all those great records on Atlantic back in the old days. He did such an incredible job on so many artists, but certainly with Aretha Franklin. And then Barry Beckett, one of the founders of the Muscle Shoals Studios there and one of the principals of the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, right? So this is a major label and two heavy hitters for producers here. And it is said, what I saw in my research seems to indicate that the label was really behind this band. And Jerry Wexler really believed in this group. And apparently, man, they're starting right out on their first record, which was recorded in 76. And then this single ended up coming out in 77. But they start them out there right in 76. Major label, big name, big time producers, major recording studio, just all the right connections, right? Well, the album comes out, doesn't really do too much, kind of lays there for a little while. Eventually, they get around to releasing this song, Smoke from a Distant Fire, as a single in the spring of 77, as I said. And it becomes a big top 10 pop hit, right? And it's a pretty cool tune. Now, the thing is, I always sort of heard this song. First of all, I do remember it very, very well from that summer of 77. I always thought it stood out on the radio, being kind of a cool little blue-eyed soul number. And I remember seeing these guys. Now, originally, I thought I saw them open for the Doobie Brothers, is what I was going to say, in 76 or 77. But then I read that they had opened up for Fleetwood Mac on some of the dates for the Rumors tour. And that could have been very well where I saw the Sanford Townsend Band, because they definitely opened up for someone that I was going to see a concert to. And the Doobie Brothers are on Warner Brothers as well, just like Fleetwood Mac was back then. So it very well could have been the Doobie Brothers, but I think it was Fleetwood Mac. In hindsight, I think they opened that Rumors show. And I saw them live, and they put on a decent show. They did a nice job performing this song. And there was nothing that would have indicated, major fatal flaws in the sound of the Sanford Townsend Band. Nothing that overtly would indicate that they were not going to be able to follow this up. But I think having looked into it a little bit more closely and sort of seeing the origins, sort of what their backstory was of Ed Sanford and John Townsend being first studio musicians and then having a songwriting and publishing contract with the label before they got their actual record deal for the band, I could see that sort of where they were coming from is they were trying to make it and they were working hard, but that ultimately I think maybe their sound was just a little bit too derivative and they couldn't really seem to find their own signature sound. That would be my best guess. And even a song like this, as groovy as this song is, kind of a bouncy little blue-eyed soul number, as you'll hear here in a minute, even a sound like this, which was a perfectly acceptable pop sound back then based on the success that Boz Scaggs had had there in 1976 with that Silk Degrees album, right? I mean, that album really just was such a bombshell there in the pop music marketplace at that great blue-eyed soul sound that Boz Scaggs had. So that was a sound that was on the radio and in the consciousness of the music buying public there. And it looked like for a split second there that Sanford Townsend Band was going to be able to capitalize on that. But as I said, in hindsight, I think maybe there was a little too much sort of a poppy Loggins and Messina kind of influence on this song. And these guys had been associated with Loggins and Messina in their writing career. And I think they actually wrote a tune for a Loggins and Messina album, Ed Sanford and John Townsend did. So I think maybe in hindsight, I would say there was a little too much Loggins and Messina, sort of that playful, bouncy pop vibe, and maybe not quite as much of the more serious, at least to my ears, the more serious Boz Scaggs vibe, where you had just such incredible musicianship and such a great writing and arranging and the whole package. But with Boz Scaggs, the difference was it all sounded totally original and it suited Boz Scaggs to a T. And he was able to make a signature sound out of that as part of his career. But with these guys, apparently they were not able to do that. But boy, did they ever hit it out of the park this one time. And this was a favorite back there in the summer of 77 for me and a lot of other people. And it still sounds pretty groovy all these years later. It is, let's take one more look at these guys. Now, I think when I saw him, this is John Townsend over here. He was playing a really cool keyboard in the concert because he had a keyboard that was on a riser that spun around so he could spin it around and face the audience and face the crowd, depending on what he was doing. That is my one memory of the Sanford Townsend Band back there when they opened the show in the mid-70s. But let's hear their big hit. Always thought this was such a groovy and fun song, and it still sounds great. Girl, your eyes have the mist from the smoke of a distant fire. Some cool lyrics on this one, too. Check those out. Almost a Van Morrison. You left me here on your way to paradise. You pulled the rug right out from under my life. I know where you go to, I knew when you came home last night. 'Cause your eyes had a mist from the smoke of a distant fire. Wow. Pretty punchy, pretty dynamic performance there from the Sanford Townsend band. You can't critique much about that performance, right? That is just a expertly played, beautifully arranged, really well done tune, right? And here we go again, as the case with so many of these one-hit wonders. How in the hell can you do such a bang-up job on a song like that with so many cool musical elements going on there? You got those groovy walking bass lines and those nice vocals, pretty punchy band performance, nice arrangement with some cool dynamics and cool changes in there. What's not to love, right? But again, I think for me, having gone back now and listening to it all these years later, and as I said, they're sort of hearing that Loggins and Messina side of the story in terms of that these two guys were sort of loosely affiliated with Loggins and Messina and had friends that were in the Loggins and Messina band that had come in and helped them out with the album and things like that. I think ultimately maybe that was sort of, they weren't able to kind of maintain either that sound or go in a slightly different direction, as I had mentioned with some of the Boz Scaggs Blue-Eyed Soul material, or most importantly, find their own voice and find their own signature sound while still utilizing all of those elements, right? Because they certainly utilized all of the elements. And for this particular song, there is their signature sound right there. This song is their signature sound. But yeah, for whatever reason, when it came to writing and carrying on after this, they were not able to do that. As I said, despite the fact that, man, they got Warner Brothers behind them and Jerry Wexler and Barry Beckett and the recording and Muscle Shoals. That intro there sort of reminded me like of Van Morrison, some of the grooves that Van Morrison had back there in the mid-'70s. So I think maybe it was a situation where these guys were really adept at picking out these vibes and picking out these sounds and these elements that they wanted to use, but they were not as adept at spinning them in an individual way that would sort of set them apart. In the end, they just sort of end up sounding like a really good Loggins and Messina sort of adaptation or influence, right? And as you know, with Loggins and Messina already on the scene back then in that hyper-competitive 70s music marketplace, like I always talk about, that's where they sort of left it there with Ed Sanford and John Townsend. But man, did they crush that one. Smoke from a Distant Fire from the summer of 1977. I'm sure that baby is still paying those guys handsomely, right? A top 10 record back in the 70s, and it still sounds cool. Yeah, I'm sure they're still getting paid. Nice job, guys. I'll take that song on my resume. Hell yes. Girl, your eyes have a mist from the smoke of a distant fire. I like when they go, don't let the screen door hit you on your way out. That's the way to tell them. See you in the next one, guys. Hope you dug the Sanford Townsend Band. You remember that one from back there in the 70s? Pretty jaunty little number on the old car radio, wasn't it? Back then in the summer of 77, you better believe that. See you in the next one, folks. Loggins and Messina vibe there.